first speaker is Ben Power from TENI. Ben.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking Amnesty and Colin for inviting me to speak here today and for the work that they've put into that excellent report. We'll hope that it will be really valuable in advocating for the most inclusive gender recognition possible. Transgender people in Ireland experience significant marginalisation and stigmatisation. Our community faces some of the highest levels of discrimination in employment, education, healthcare, which relegates many of us to the fringes of society. The lack of legal recognition is a major issue for Irish trans people, where their discrepancies in our legal documents were outed against our will and left vulnerable to discrimination, harassment, and even violence. We're denied the basic right to privacy we're denied the basic right to respect for our private and family life, and this urgently needs to be addressed. I was asked to speak today about some of my personal experiences on how I've been impacted by this legislation. So I was registered as female at birth, and naturally all of my documentation from that point on was gendered as such. So when I began my transition in 2007, I therefore had to start the arduous process of actually changing all of the documentation that I could to reflect my true identity. It involved an exhausting process of contacting every entity that held any information on me whatsoever, and then having to explain to a generally extremely confused person on the end of a telephone as to why I needed my name to be changed from the very obviously female one it was to the very obviously male one it now is. And it made for some very interesting conversations and some even more interesting results. My electricity bill started to arrive to address to Mr. and Mrs. both my names, because apparently Bord Gosh thought the possibility that I'd married myself was far more likely than the existence of trans people. So I grinned and bore the inconvenience as best I could. I figured eventually it'll be done, I won't have to think about it anymore. Yeah. That's where I made my first mistake. It is true that trans people in Ireland can change some of our identity documents on the production of reams of medical evidence and other evidence. When I applied for my passport, I had to supply all the usual documentation, your birth cert, your proofs of address, everything else that everyone has to supply. Also my deed poll, fair enough, to show my legal change of name. I then also had to supply letters from my GP, my psychiatrist, 2 years worth of medical history from my specialist in London, and a tax certificate, because apparently the household bills that one would normally supply to prove identity weren't proof enough that I was legally using my name. So all of that entitled me to get a 2-year passport, for which I had to pay the full 10-year price, which then enabled me to change most of my other documentation, like my driver's licence and other things. But it was when I went to get my PPS number changed that I ran into my first difficulty. They grudgingly changed the name on my PPS number because legally they were obliged to, but they informed me that because my birth cert still said that I was female, that they were unable to change the gender marker attached to my PPS number. Now the impact of that means that anytime anybody puts my PPS number into a computer system, what comes up on the system is Benjamin Dylan James Power, female. Now at best that leads to somebody assuming that a mistake has been made. At worst it leads to awkward questions, often in very public places like tax offices or welfare offices, about why my name is different and why it says that I'm female, and often there's insinuations as to whether or not I'm attempting to fraudulently pay tax or whatever. And these, like, it comes up in situations where it's just not relevant or necessary. There's no need for people to know whether I'm female or female in order for me to pay my taxes, or in order for me to claim a welfare benefit, or apply for a job, etc. This form of outing happens to trans people on a regular basis as a result of mismatched documents. When we're outed, we're often denied access to employment, education, healthcare, and we're even subjected to harassment and physical violence occasionally. On the 2nd of December last year, Transgender Equality Network Ireland published a report called Speaking from the Margins, Trans Mental Health and Wellbeing in Ireland. And some of the results from that report are truly disturbing. 21% of respondents reported having experienced physical violence. 44% reported experiencing physical intimidation and threats. 15% reported sexual assault, and 7% reported being raped, all as a direct result of being trans. During 2013, TENI also ran a campaign called Stop Transphobia and Discrimination, or STOD, to raise awareness about transphobic violence in Ireland and enable the trans community to report hate crimes and incidents in a safe environment without fear of discrimination or ridicule. The reporting period began on the 1st of March 2013 and ended on the 31st of October. During this time, we had 15 incidents that could be categorised as hate crimes, and 17 incidents that were reported that were categorised as other incidents with a bias motivation. And that shows very clearly the danger that can be posed to trans people when our trans status is disclosed. There's serious implications for our personal safety. According to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Articles 3, 6 and 12, everyone has the right to life, liberty and security of the person. Everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law, and no one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with their privacy, family, home or correspondence, nor to attacks upon their honour and reputation. Everyone has the right to the protection of the law against such interference or attacks. These are rights that trans people are denied by simply the lack of this very simple administrative procedure which allows us to change our foundational identity document. 6 years ago, our government was found to be in breach of the European Convention on Human Rights in this issue in refusing to grant Dr. Lydia Foy the right to amend her birth cert. Today, she and we are still waiting for that right. I hope that this report from Amnesty International will help to speed along the introduction of progressive, fully inclusive and rights-based legislation. And I really look forward to the day when I no longer have to stand up and explain my identity for something as simple as apply for a job or a college place. Thanks very much.